Welcome to A More Perfect Union. I'm Peter J. And with me today, sitting right next to me. Now, were you inimitable? Was that working out there? The inimitable Alan Earls. Okay, yes.
And the voice of
You
reason.
last episode we were busy being inimitable, but we were also motley, just so. And we try to maintain that, taking in all sides. And of course, on the other side of the table, but definitely with us, we have Jeff Roy. Yay, Jeff.
Thank you.
There you go. Yes.
Pump the iron.
All the way from Beacon Hill. And our host, who will introduce our Zoom guest, Dr. Michael Walker Jones.
Good morning. And thank you very much for joining us this morning. We've got a great topic today, gentlemen. But before we start, let me do this. Let me thank those of you who have been watching us now for, I think this is our second episode.
Yes.
And now we're in studio. There will be hopefully some modifications and wonderful additions to come in the future. But
Vast expansions.
Oh,
vast expansions.
exactly. And
That's
stuff,
right,
Okay.
yes.
But public access television is here, as well as public access radio. And I want to thank our executive director,
I'll be him.
Mr. Peter J. and stuff, for keeping us alive and well. Thank you, sir. Today we're going to be talking about a very local but national topic. We're going to be talking about the idea that public employees, especially teachers, should have an opportunity in a labor relations environment to strike without penalties. That, along with a few other issues that we're going to discuss. We have, as with most of the topics here in Massachusetts, one of the great advocates from the largest teacher union in the state, the Massachusetts Teachers Association, and that happens to be the president of the Mass Teachers Association, Mr. Max Page. And Max is the president of the 117,000 member association that expands the entire state. I will make one clarity, and that is, or one point of clarity, and that is that the Mass Teachers Association does not represent Boston, that they are represented by the American Federation of Teachers. So let's not confuse, I guess, what basically happens to be two of the most premier associations in the country, the American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association. The Massachusetts Teachers Association is part of the National Education Association. Max has been the president now, I think, for over 2 years. And he is a longtime teacher advocate. He is a representative coming out of the higher ed ranks. However, MTA does represent educators of all stripes, both educational support personnel, as well as classroom teachers, as well as higher ed professors, and the professional and clerical folks at the higher ed level. But we have also a very special guest. She is from the United Teachers of Los Angeles. She happens to be not only a personal friend, but also one of the premier leaders of the country. Her name is Cecily Mayarts Cruz. Cecily has the distinction of being the first person of color to represent the largest or second largest teacher union in the United States in terms of a city. And her membership, which is well over, well, I'll let her tell you about how large it is, but it's well over 150,000 members.
Wow.
And it is a pleasure to have her. For her, it is early in the morning. It's 6 o'clock in the morning, where she's coming from, out of Los Angeles.
Would you get her a cup of coffee,
I was
please?
going to suggest that.
As soon as I get mine.
Oh, wow. He's first.
I see.
Sorry, Cecily. I was fighting
see.
before you.
Yeah, well, now let's talk about the issue of teacher strikes in Massachusetts first before we invite our guests to jump in. In Massachusetts in 1972, as we know here at this table, and some of you out there who are watching us may know, Massachusetts enacted, I think it was either the second or the third labor relations collective bargaining law in the country. I think Wisconsin was first, and I think Massachusetts was either second or third. But as part of that, as in a lot of states, including some of our neighbors, when the law was enacted, it included certain restrictions around the idea that the union could go out on strike. It does include unfair labor practices from both parties' parts. It includes, I believe, a standard by which bargaining ought to take place, which is good faith, which has some legal connotations to it, as a matter of fact. And it also includes the idea that the best people to make decisions are those who are at the local level. Okay. However, if the union decides that it's going to take that ultimate job action, and that is to withhold its services from the community, and they go out on strike, it's the school committee then can petition the courts to send the teachers back. And if they prove that in court that yes, the teachers are out on an illegal strike, then the teachers can be held responsible to the point of penalty. And as a matter of fact, for those of you who may not know, one of the first strikes in the state happened right here in our community, which is why this is such a salient topic for us. And you notice I use that big word, salient.
Very good.
Important, okay, for those of you who may not necessarily know that particular phrase. But anyway, Franklin not only was one of the first strikes, but it was one of the first ones where certain penalties that I don't think have been imposed for quite some time now, that is, the leaders of the strike were put in jail.
Wow.
Now, since the 1970s, the law itself hasn't changed very much. But it's my understanding that our good friends in the Great and General Court will be considering changing the law in order to carve out a sort of less restrictive ability of teachers in Massachusetts to go out and strike. So, with that being said, I'd like to first introduce our first guest. Again, the president of the Massachusetts Teachers Association, Mr. Max Page. And let's talk a little bit, Max, about why it is that teachers feel they need to change this particular provision of this law. Welcome, and Max joins us now.
Well, thank you all. Thank you, Michael. It's really great to be on with this great group, and it is great to see you again, Rep. Roy. We worked together on a number of issues on higher education in particular. So we actually did just have a hearing about this bill that would allow for the right to strike under certain conditions for educators. I want to emphasize, of course, as you well know, Michael, we use the word educators because we represent classroom teachers, paraprofessionals, clerical staff, cafeteria workers, custodians, higher ed faculty, dorm workers. We represent all those adults who help educate and nurture our young people from the very early stages up through public higher education in Massachusetts. So it is in some ways a very simple argument, which is that we believe that the right to withhold one's labor is actually a fundamental labor and even human right. And it's not just me making that up. In some international declarations of human rights, the labor rights, like the right to withhold labor, is considered central. It is one of it is the most sort of profound tool that workers have ultimately. And I would say that what we have in Massachusetts is a fundamentally imbalanced system where the vast majority of the power lies with the employer, And when necessary, in those few cases where it is necessary, educators deserve that right to make sure that they can advocate for a fair contract. Now, I want to emphasize what you just said, Michael. You mentioned Franklin strike, and I actually would like to share with everyone. Go to schoolstrikeshistory.org, schoolstrikeshistory.org, and you will see a really wonderful timeline and some information about each of the strikes in that, at least within the Massachusetts Teachers Association over the past 50 years. And it's been about 50. So we have 400 locals, and that's 50 years. It has happened rarely in Massachusetts because in most cases, there is a resolution of negotiations at the table through a variety of other techniques that we get to a fair contract. In those rare instances, where an employer is really resistant and employing all kinds of tactics to prevent the two sides to getting to a fair resolution and refusing to really negotiate on the core issues of concern of our professional educators, strikes have happened. And our locals have made that decision. We are a confederation in many ways. We have 400 locals who are independent, but they make that choice on their own. But I think I'm trying to speak up for where they come from. And the key, I do want to emphasize right at the beginning that the law that we have proposed would require 6 months of good faith bargaining. So let's say you would start January 1. The two sides would have to negotiate for 6 months before a local could initiate a strike. So that is more than enough time for a successor agreement, meaning another 3-year agreement to be negotiated. And what we have seen in all the strikes in the dozen strikes in the last 6 or 7 years have been contracts that have been held up 10 months, a year and a half, or even longer. So this is about finally resolving a really divisive situation and getting to a solution. Because what happened in each of these cases, when locals have gone on strike, they have both secured better contracts, which means better education for our students, and they have resolved a many months or years long conflict. So those are some of the reasons why we think it's absolutely essential. And as I know, that's why you invited the great Cecily Mayart Cruz. Other states, 11, I believe, if not 12, at least 11 other states do have the right to strike for public sector workers, including educators.
Max, let me clarify. When you say that the current or that your particular bill that you're looking at would require 6 months of negotiations, that's at a minimum, isn't it? That's not a maximum. That's a minimum of 6 months. So basically, negotiations could go on a year and a half prior to a local making a decision to go on strike. It
Of
doesn't
course.
require
It just
them to
means
go on strike at 6 months.
No, absolutely. It just means that a local could not move towards taking a vote to go on strike until there has been 6 months of good faith bargaining.
A
Yes, so
minimum
then
of 6 months. Again, I want to clarify that.
There's no requirement. They could go on as long as, and as I say, the vast majority of locals will resolve their contracts and hopefully make progress towards improved
Okay.
schools without needing a strike.
Because I know some of the communities, and as a matter of fact, some of the opposition might say a misunderstanding of that would say, look, what we're trying to do is truncate all of the bargaining into 6 months, which may not necessarily be enough time for a community to have all of its financials put together, for all of the implications of what other contracts might mean to that community. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Yeah.
Okay.
No one could ever be forced to go on strike. This
Okay.
is simply allows for. It's very clear that it only opens up the legal possibility for a local to take that vote of its members after 6 months. It does not require it.
Okay. And it seems to me that there is some opposition to this particular bill. Let me make sure that that we are clear. This particular bill, Jeff, it's my understanding, is only for teachers. This is not for all public employees. Is that correct?
That's my understanding of it. I wasn't present at the hearing, that took place. I'm not on the education committee, but that's what I've heard. And I will say, I understand the issue involved, but you go back and I haven't seen a groundswell of enthusiasm for this particular bill because the outside example is that when you take away the opportunity for students to learn, the impact is a lot greater than in any other type of labor action. A kid can
Except
go,
for first responders.
well, those types of activities. I mean, the
Right.
law that prohibits
So
the
you're
strikes.
equating first responders and teachers in the sort of the same bracket. Is that
Right.
would that be accurate?
The statute that we're talking about is all public employees
Okay.
being prohibited. But speaking specifically for teachers, because this is what the proposed bill is all about, a kid goes to the third grade only one time in life, and to have a disruption of an extended period of time is unfathomable. Fathomable. It's not Monday morning.
It's
gonna
not.
try.
It's not,
Not a
good.
good idea.
It's not good. We have laws on the books
Right.
about attendance. Students have to attend school for 180 days. If you do not send your child to school and your child is delinquent, you can be criminally charged. That's the value and importance we put on having students in school. And why do we do this? Because an educated citizenry is really what is the fabric
Yeah, but let's
underlying
be-
America. So,
yeah, but let's be
that,
fair.
I'm being fair. I just want to lay out where
Okay.
folks in the legislature, and I'm not speaking for everybody, but that
Thank goodness.
colors, that colors the lack of enthusiasm that I sense among my colleagues.
I got you. And it seems to me that there are some of those restrictions, though, that the general public doesn't understand. It's not. I think that there are a lot of value in the fact that teachers are advocating, in most instances, their work environment is the student's learning environment. So let's not downplay the idea that teachers, when they say to their employer, look, this is not right, not all of that is about the idea that we just want more money. As a matter of fact, let's bring in our guest from California, where teacher strikes are legal. President Maillard, your local went on strike, and you went on strike for what cause? Would you help us to understand what it was in your community that helped to sort of bring out the idea that having legal strikes is not necessarily a problem? Good morning to
Yes.
you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on this this program. Yeah, listening to the conversation, I'm like, oh, okay, I definitely want to jump in. And I did testify via Zoom on Massachusetts' behalf because they should have the right to strike. And I think it's foolish to think that, look at our citizenry right now. Critical thinking skills are out of the window. If we are really going to be talking this, educators don't want to go on strike, period, point blank. But we do want and deserve to have the resources necessary to do our jobs every single day. One job should be enough. Clearly, that is not the case. Now, I can't speak to, Max can give you what the, how much you need to be able to own property in Massachusetts. But I'll tell you here in Los Angeles, California, our folks can't afford to live where they work. And that's where folks want to be. Our working conditions are the students' learning conditions. Everybody should know that. That's basic. And what happens to our students happens to us as educators, because for all of the reasons that we're saying that we need to have resources, mental health resources. We need to have education support professionals cleaning our classrooms, because if we don't have them, guess who cleans the classroom? The educator and the students. It becomes chores and jobs. So let me not get on a tangent, but I will say that in the last 5 years, UTLA, United Teachers Los Angeles members, engaged in 2 strikes. To form our UTLA and have collective bargaining, they went on strike in 1970 for 23 days. In 1989, when I was an 11th grade student, folks went on strike for 12 days. In 2019, we went on strike for 9 days in the pouring torrential rains that we didn't know existed in Southern California. And we went on strike not for a pay raise. We went on strike for something called bargaining for the common good. We actually were looking at what do students, what does the community, what do parents actually want to see in our schools? And we lifted up those issues alongside other issues. One, community schools. Actually having the wraparound services of folks being able to walk to school and be in their community. That was one of the linchpins of our strike, not the money, because we still don't have the money. But we went on strike because of fundamental issues of resources for our kids. In 2023, our folks engaged in another strike. And what was that strike about? Oh, it wasn't a UTLA strike. It was our education service professionals, our Black and brown workers who are so sorely underpaid, below the poverty line. They engaged in a strike and they asked us to have a sympathy strike with them. We were in bargaining. That should have been a no-go, but we don't cross picket lines here in Los Angeles. So we said, absolutely, we're gonna stand in the gap with our classified staff. And they did that for 3 days. And at the end of 3 days, we helped leverage power for them to win a wonderful contract. They're in bargaining again. We're in bargaining. We are bargaining up and down the state with 11 locals. And, we are not afraid of direct action to any boss, whether it is the governor, whether it is locally our district. Folks deserve to have the resources necessary to do the job.
And I just want to chime in because I did hear a theme in what you were saying, that it's not all about money. And I get that. Teachers to me are the most valuable resource that we have to educate our citizenry and keep our democracy going. And I heard your comments at the very beginning, couldn't agree with you more. We are in very tough times. But all of the resources that we provide, whether it be mental health services, supplies for teachers, cleaning the rooms, that all is resources that cost money. And I speak from the community of Franklin, Massachusetts, that just went through an override vote to provide more resources for our schools and other town services to provide the services that are needed. And that override failed. It failed by 150 votes, somewhere around there, very close margin. So now we're presented with a situation where we don't have the financial resources to provide what we need And what are we to do? As a government, you have to live within what the people are willing to provide for you. And if they're not going to provide the financial resources, then you have to adjust your policies and programs to meet with what the citizens are telling you. And I can tell you, I was a strong advocate for that override. I think Alan will vouch for the fact that, yes, I do support those types of increases to provide the resources for these folks. But having seen it failed, what are we to do? And I do not believe that a strike in the middle of this is the way we're going to fix this problem. But I'm here with an open mind. I will tell you that.
Well,
but I
that
just
brings
want to
up-
give you my context.
That brings up a great question. And Alan, I know there was a real breath of fresh air in terms of the Republicans and Democrats here in Franklin working together for the override. In other words, it was not a political issue per se.
Right.
Okay.
Certainly not a partisan issue.
A partisan issue. Okay.
And it was the second time that the override had been addressed, by the way, because it had failed once before.
Right.
So I throw this question out first to Alan and then to our guest. When the community comes together, Alan, and says, no,
Yep.
we don't want to spend the resources for whatever you're putting in front of us in terms of reason. And clearly, in this community, the override was built on a platform of we're going to lose teachers, we're going to lose resources for our schools if this override doesn't pass. Community said, okay, fine. And by a small majority, okay, not majority, but by a small number,
Right.
the override failed.
Yes.
Okay, it was not clear that it was an overwhelming, but the community spoke. The majority of the
That's right.
folks in the community voted no, the override will not pass. So in a situation like that, Alan, how do you see the community then reacting when the teachers say, yeah, but we still need these resources, and they have the opportunity now, not necessarily make the decision, but they have the opportunity to go on strike. What would be your reaction to that?
Well, I'm not sure what my personal reaction would be. I'd have to be there in the moment. But
Okay.
I would say that in this community, two things about the override. When it was presented several months back, it was primarily posited for the schools. That didn't sway people. So it was reformulated where they talked about the override, increasing taxes benefiting all departments, and the advocates provided a longer list of penalties if it didn't go through, and people still rejected it. So it was not a huge margin, but nonetheless, clearly there isn't a strong support and overwhelming support for the override for spending more money. So I think if you layer on top of that potential of this teacher strike, you would probably dig a deeper hole for advocates of education spending. I think a lot of people would just feel like, well, we've spoken, we the people. Obviously not all, but I think a fair number of people would be taken aback by that and probably not too sympathetic. And I'm glad you brought up the Proposition 2.5 problem, which is a Massachusetts uniqueness. I guess California has some tax limitations, but that's a statewide problem.
Yeah.
Municipalities between a rock and a hard place, and if you add strikes on top of that, that's very difficult and probably produces more fractious situations within a government, and probably ends up not being particularly constructive. But mind you, I'm here because I represent a more conservative viewpoint on a lot of things, so I may be completely wrong, but I think that's an issue that has to be thought through.
Well, Max, what that does is throw out the something you said that is always the case, I guess, in Massachusetts. This is a local decision. That is the idea that a teacher union would go on strike is a local decision, similar to what President Maillard said, that it was the teachers of Los Angeles, not the teachers of Santa Cruz or San Diego, who were pushing the issue, but it was the teachers of Los Angeles looking at their environment. So, Max, wouldn't these kinds of situations all be situational? So just because it's on the books, and here's where I challenge the legislature, just because it's on the books that you have the opportunity, don't you have to have some faith in not only the school committee, which at this particular point is against this particular piece of legislation, don't you have to have some faith in your teachers to know what their environment is and give them that opportunity as human beings, as adults, as respected professionals in the community to make a decision?
Obviously,
yeah,
I
go
agree,
ahead.
Michael. Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I mean, there's a couple things I want to say that, yes, these are all local decisions. As I said, if you go to schoolstrikeshistory.org, you will see 50 strikes in the past 50 years. And we, again, have 400 locals in the MTA. This is a rare occurrence. I will stipulate to you all first, I believe firmly if there was the right to strike, there would be fewer strikes because it would start a clock ticking in, let's say, January 1st, beginning of bargaining before July 1, start to a new contract. And those few places, using often some of the worst lawyers like Valerio Dalmanello and Hillman, a law firm that is usually associated with the places that have gone on strike, they would feel the clock ticking and would say, you know what, we better get to the table because otherwise we can't delay them forever and ever and ever. So that's one point. I do want to emphasize that I understand there's maybe not a feeling in the legislature, or I hear from the Republicans. In fact, the public is generally in support of educators having this right because they trust that educators have the best interests of their schools and their students in mind. And if the educators say, I'm sorry, we have tried everything, this is what we need to do, the parents have rallied to us. And we've done polling, and the general public is supportive because they just know these are the people we trust. I have 3 children in New Amherst Public Schools I sent them to. We trust them with their lives, with their upbringing. They are co-parents in a way. They nurture and raise our children. And if they say this is what we need, then in general, parents and the community are supportive. It is not what anyone wants. Every day, on day one, all that my members are saying is, I want to be back in the classroom. I don't want to be out. They want to educate and be in the classroom. Sometimes they have felt that they have to do this. And I just want to pick up on one point very quickly, as Cecily brought up about our education support professionals. That's the broad category. Paraprofessionals, often it includes the clerical workers, custodians, the lowest paid. In Massachusetts, the minimum wage does not apply to municipalities. We have paraprofessionals caring for our neediest children making below the $15 minimum wage. And we have been asking about this for years, right? Every time we come to the table, not we, but our locals come to the table and say, we really need to raise the wages of ESPs. Hasn't happened. The biggest gains happened in places where they had either very powerful contract campaigns. Somerville now has a $50,000 starting wage. They didn't go on strike, but they built off of other great campaigns, including some strikes where locals said, we have got to stop this game of every 3 years asking for a decent pay for ESPs and being denied every 3 years. And so they said, enough. We need to dramatically raise to a living wage or close to a living wage for our education support professionals. So I just want to put it in context what the fights have been about. That's been the core fight in every recent strike, is how we pay a living wage to our education support professionals.
And it seems to me that there is this issue as well that we haven't really sort of dived into deeply, which is the idea that at current structure, the employer basically has all of the ability, if you will, to, I think as Max put it, wait them out. They can just keep delaying and delaying and delaying. We don't have the money. We don't have this. We don't have that. So what's the motivation then that the employer, the community, if you will, given that, let's say, the teachers are already understanding the environment, they understand the resources, and I must attest that I have yet to see a local association in this state or any of the other states that I've observed where teachers at all levels, educators at all levels, don't understand the data and the statistics So it's not a matter of they're walking in asking for pie in the sky. I think those particular days are gone. I think there are a lot of true understanding on the part of educators and bargaining associations about not only the environment, but all the resources that are available. And I think, as Cecily and Max have put it as well, that they also understand the education environment, their work environment, if you will. So it seems to me that we've got to put some faith in both sides that they're bargaining, quote unquote, in good faith with this, which is a legal term. And it seems to me that, you know, if the community, and I can understand why it is that the MTA is of the not only opinion, but may have data that the community supports teachers having this particular right. But it seems to me that there is an opportunity here for us to take a deeper look at the balance of power, if you will, especially in these days and times.
I served on a school committee for
Oh, you did?
for 10 years.
You did, yes.
And negotiated contracts every 3 years. And I can tell you without question, I never felt that we were in a superior bargaining position to any of the local unions, and never felt that we were capable of being in the position of waiting anybody out. It was vital to us that we had contracts. I was more concerned as a negotiator at the table with what other communities were doing to provide more robust services, because I viewed it as, hey, if we don't
It's a
take care of
competitive advantage,
if we
sure.
don't take care of our people, they're going to move to other communities. And it felt like Franklin was a training ground for folks who were looking for better opportunities. And that was always the position that I was taking and my colleagues were taking at the table, saying we need to take care of our folks, because if we don't, there are so many other communities out there that will poach them in a heartbeat.
Right.
So, you know, I often felt that we were the weaker of the bargaining folks, and we typically got our contracts done on time and had results that everybody, I will say, nobody was ever happy, and that included us. But that's when I knew we had a good deal.
Right.
I would like to chime in on that. There's an old saw about compromise negotiation. You know, basically, when you get to that point, it's a case where everybody walks away feeling equally cheated. But you know, on that
What
light
did
note,
I leave on the table?
right, exactly. But there are a couple of points I want to make, because a lot about this issue gets reduced down to black and white, and unfortunately, I think that tends to oversimplify. There are some shades of gray here that I think it's good to focus on. For instance, with respect to the nature of harm, first responders, the harm is clear. You know, no first responders, somebody dies, somebody's house burns down. Call it what you will, but that kind of harm is irreparable when it happens. In the case of teachers, it's interesting to note that not only can you look at, okay, there's harm with the students, and I agree with that, but there in fact may be remedies. In other words, if you have a 5-day strike, the question then becomes, does it make the school year 5 days longer in the end as a remedy? In other words,
It
what
must.
can you do following a strike to mitigate any perception of harm, given that the strike may be brief? Also, too, just with respect to the nature of negotiation, and you know, good faith negotiation particularly, I don't think that there's a teachers union in the world that would go on strike for frivolous reasons or you know, specious engagement. But again, considering the notion that everybody's negotiating in good faith, things are moving along, hey, you know, we've got a lot of points we've already kind of settled on here. We feel like we're in the home stretch, or certainly past the halfway mark and moving, and that there's some momentum in the negotiations that everyone feels can keep going. Nobody's going to go on strike in those conditions, because everybody wants to get to the end and avoid a strike. But if on the other hand it's been 6 months with zero progress and everybody's in their respective corners and not coming out, well, then we have a different discussion. And just returning back to harm for a moment, there's the phrase damages subsequent and consequent, which, Jeff, you'd certainly be aware of. The idea that you have to consider harm on both sides of the discussion. And in my mind, if teachers are identifying an existent harm in their teaching environment that they feel needs to be undone, if there is an existent condition, a limitation that they're looking to negotiate away to address in, a new contract, what they're doing is they're fighting to take away a harm, whether it's for the teachers themselves, for the students particularly, and for the supporting workers. So there's the harm you can be discussing in the room and the prospective harm of being forced to go on strike to address the issue at hand. And if you're going on strike and get to a position where we arrive at a better outcome for these teachers, the students, and the environment, then what you have is just cause. You have actually what is a good story about why strikes have value in this environment. So on the one hand, there needs to be, call it a high bar to make a strike worthwhile.
This brings up an issue I think that Cecily, you and Max, I think both have. I think in Los Angeles they already exist, and that is the concept of community schools. You mentioned that earlier. I want to get a little bit deeper into that because our viewers and some of you here at the table may not understand that when teachers are talking about, we're here trying to create services as well as an environment that improves the student condition, which then helps us to improve our teaching environment, okay? And that teachers are willing to, again, take that ultimate step in order to push that in the community. How does that resonate, Cecily? Because I know when the one of the strikes that you mentioned, that was one of the core issues in Los Angeles, was the creation of community schools. And Max, after she has had an opportunity to sort of describe that for us, describe where Massachusetts is with that same concept of community schools.
Yes, community schools, we have 70 now in Los Angeles. That's not nearly enough. However, we're
Out of how many
making
schools,
a
Cecily?
mark. I'm sorry?
Out of how many schools? You've got 70 out of how many schools?
We have 400 and something thousand students with 925 work sites. So,
Right.
that's a drop in the bucket. However, it was something that we went on strike for and codified, finally codified in the 2023 strike when we finished and got everything. We have it now as a part of our contract, the notion of community schools. And so it's more than wraparound services, and NEA has a really good like 2-minute, 30-second video. When Max starts talking, then I'll look it up. But I want to say it's like NEA .org/community schools. I could be right. I'm sure I am. And it's like 2 minutes and 36 seconds, which would tell you that it's like, some of our schools and community schools, it's actually every stakeholder in the school got to say what this community wanted to see. So parents, community allies, students, education support professionals, all of those folks, every single stakeholder every single community org that says, here's the school in our neighborhood. What is it that we want to see? And a school like 93rd Street said that they really, in their neighborhood, really needed a food pantry. They needed that. And so they had this food pantry that where the door opens to the outside, families can come into that food pantry and get the things that they need. There are bags, so forth. They have sponsorships with different they have sponsorships with different grocery stores and so forth. And it is very phenomenal. They also have where it is a not only a pantry of food, but they also have a clothing pantry. And at that specific school, and folks can come and get new shoes and other things in there, which is phenomenal. One of the things that they started this year was a cool down room. So some kids that were having a tough day can go to the cool down room, and there's yoga mats and bouncy balls and tactile things for students to calm down before they went back to class. Those are the foundational things when you're actually looking at a student population in a decimated South Central area where there is trauma at your doorstep every day. To have the supports necessary to come to school and say, you know what, I have a hole in my shoe, go to the room and pick you a new pair of shoes.
Now, Cecily,
Those
let me
are the things
now
that
let
are
me
beautiful.
clarify. These are you saying that it was through the teachers' negotiations that created this opportunity for the stakeholders, parents, students, concerns, teacher concerns to be brought to that individual school?
Yeah, each school it created their own community schools hub and asked every stakeholder. So each community school is different by design,
Right.
because it's what is necessary in that community.
Now, again, it seems to me that Massachusetts has an opportunity to look at what are some of the things that are not happening in collective bargaining that could become part of that process if teachers feel empowered. And because, albeit, Jeff, I know when you were talking about being on the school committee, which that experience I also shared with you, because I happened to be at the time working for the teachers union, and
I have the scars to show it.
it seems to me that you have ferreted well, okay, because they're in places where they don't show.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that, again, is what you're talking about with regard to a feeling or a sense of equalness on the part of school committee members. Can we be assured that that is shared or will continue to be shared in Massachusetts, given the times that we have? And Max, can you address the idea that, again, community schools, where is Massachusetts, especially the MTA, with regard to providing opportunities for teachers to have this kind of voice, if you will, at the bargaining table?
So the issue of community schools has not been one of the focuses of any of the strikes that locals have chosen to engage in, but look, we are at the beginning. We are inspired by what UTLA has done and what the California Teachers Association has done in other places in California. I mean, California really has led on this issue. In fact, tonight we are having a search for a new staff person specifically around community schools. There is a real excellent initiative that is coming out of Brockton and Framingham right now, and they are moving forward with sort of district-wide efforts around community schools. We have lots of individual schools that do components of what Cecily just described, but we think this is an absolutely central part of the work. And so we'll see where it comes up in negotiations, but so far it's been very collaborative in those two communities between the management and the educators. If I could just briefly, Michael, mention one point, I just want to be clear. There was maybe a little lack of clarity in the conversation. There are 180 days of classroom time required, 185 days of total class educators need to be in school. That's required by law, and that has been honored in each of these strikes. And what that has meant in Newton, an 11-day strike, there was no April vacation. Everyone came back to school. I think in other places they've extended the school year, using up what would have been snow days. So I want to be clear that every student gets the legally required classroom time. And I also want to say that there is a lesson, there are lessons in democracy and dispute resolution and standing up for oneself that students learn in the course of all contract campaigns as well as in strikes that is immeasurable. And I'm not saying that no educator says, oh, we're going to go on strike in order to teach the civics lesson. Not that at all. But I just want to say that it is disruptive. This is not something anyone wants. But students also see their beloved educators standing up for themselves and for their schools and public education more generally. I remember this as a student at Amherst Regional High School. They didn't go on strike, but they went on work to rule. And my social studies teacher, I remember clear as day, seeing him in the front hall, marching everyone out at 3:10. I was like, wow, he's standing up. Connecting what we were learning in class to what he's standing up for the schools. He's now a board member of the Massachusetts Teachers Association, my old social studies teacher. So I just want to say there is a powerful lesson that comes out of this work.
Well, Max brings up a very interesting point. To my knowledge, there has never been a strike in Massachusetts where students have lost time. Even when the teachers have been penalized here in Massachusetts, that is, that the penalties have actually taken away pay from them. It's my understanding. And help me if I'm wrong here, Max, but as you were pointing out, if a teacher strike lasts for 11 days, those 11 days have to be made up. And so students are not losing that time, which again is why I brought up the issue of, I think there is a false equivalency between first responders, where I think you were saying that some of that harm that could happen is irreparable, versus teachers and students when those days have to be made up. In other words, the learning may truncate itself for the moment, but then it has to be made up on the back end once the strike is over. So let me see if I'm accurate or being clear on that, or have I missed anything there, Max, around that? Because that's
exactly
the current
right.
law as well, right?
That is the current law, and the bill that we have filed is specifically about educators having the right after 6 months. It is specifically actually excludes public safety and corrections from that.
I also think, by the way, that given the nature of teaching and the school, and that you have a defined year, while, if they do go on strike, I personally think that there is an impetus on both sides. Mm-hmm. The teachers don't want to be on strike any longer, if you could do it in 4 days or 5 days, or, as opposed to 10, there is pressure to go back to the classroom. Mm-hmm. Just as people negotiating on the other side have their own pressures to want to come to terms and get it done and get the teachers back in the classroom. So I think that there is, I don't know if I call it a special characteristic or if, or how I define it, but just my sense that there is that pressure on both sides, unique pressure on both sides, to get to some kind of a resolution for the betterment of the students, for the minimization of harm, for the fact that summer is going to get turned upside down if this thing goes on forever, and just the real limitations of having to run the school year deep into a season where families have made plans to go away or whatnot. So I think that there's this sort of self-mitigating quality about an educator's strike that I think is in the background. I also want to just return to another one here because I know we need to wrap up at some point. But as somebody who runs this facility, manages it, and has to go out and know the community well, and I worked with the town extensively for all these listening sessions that we did. We did a half a dozen listening sessions with respect to the override. We went to this school, that school. We did it in town chambers. We did it at the Elks Club, at the senior center. We went everywhere, and covered these events where the town management and stakeholders presented all the facts of the override, what it meant, either with respect to the schools and with respect to other town services. Now, to be clear, they legally couldn't advocate for the override overtly, and that was not the goal of these listening sessions. The goal was to educate the populace. Here are stats, graphs, charts, what's going on, where we are today, where we wish we were, where we need to be. All of that was presented. Now, against that backdrop, I came away from that, Alan, feeling like there was this sort of groundswell of emotion to pass the override, the first one having failed. So this is what I was witnessing in the room at these events. But what struck me, and as a reporter, Alan, you have your own eyes and ears on it. I'd love to get that perspective on it. The outcome surprised me. I saw a lot of passion, I think, for the no vote on the override. I think people who didn't want the override to happen really kind of got behind that notion that they didn't want the override to happen, and they were public about it, with signs on lawns, etc. And I think also were more coherent. I saw some coherence in a campaign to avoid the override. And that's my takeaway after the fact. I think, I'm just, one of many people walking around on the street coming to my conclusions. And I know you were tracking it a lot more closely than me. But I'd love to get your take on what you saw.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it pretty accurately. I think there was a lot of people who were pretty articulate at the end who did look at the facts and did come to different conclusions about what makes sense. And I don't think anybody wanted to, from my understanding, disadvantage people in the schools, but they also questioned the broader logic of town spending. And I think the listening sessions you mentioned were nominally objective, but I think a lot of people came away feeling that they were being sold something subtly. That was a sales process.
Yeah, and I think some of that, by the way, might have been to the respondents in the room, people who got up and vocalized, we got to get behind this.
Yeah.
So when you lump all that together,
Right.
there was vocal support in the sessions from the citizenry that wanted to advocate for it.
And then there was a lot of.
Let me jump in quickly. So, hearing this, okay, and I look to Max and Cecily. I say, okay, these are the resources we're given as governing agents. What are we to do in the face of this community response? So, we're saying, hey, we're being sold something. Yeah. You're being sold what it takes to make your community something that everybody can be proud of. And there is salesmanship that is involved in that because we want to live in a great community. Still in the face of that, the voters said no. And now we have I think it's a crisis in the community because we have to make some serious decisions about the direction we're going. how do we fulfill the need for all the resources in the face of this?
Well,
I
I'm
throw
going to.
that question out.
Well, I'm going to throw out my my economist hat here, and I'm going to broaden the conversation.
Well, you're not going
Because-
to answer my question?
Yes, I'm going to
Okay.
answer your
All right.
question. Okay. As a matter of fact, I'm specifically going to talk about Massachusetts in a way that, again, I think contributes to this whole question.
Uh-huh.
The school committee does not have independent taxing authority
Okay.
in
true.
Massachusetts.
True.
Right.
So that when we look at schools, schools are equated to everything that the town does. Now, I go back to the issue of the override. Yes, I saw a very similar kind of environment that you gentlemen were describing, in that there seemed to be a lot of enthusiasm for the override, but for a variety of reasons.
Uh-huh.
No is easy.
Right.
We don't want our taxes to go up. We don't want, no, it's easy. And it's a very simplistic argument, okay? The people who were positive had to say, well, I don't want our first responders to lose employees, and I don't want our schools to go down. I don't want our roads and our DPW and stuff to dissipate. All right, I like it. And you may like the town for all of those reasons. And you may think this environment is a wonderful environment for all of those different reasons. But the clarity of, and here's where I throw this out to all of us, are we not really conflating the argument in something that does not really clarify the fact that what does this community really think about its schools, singularly?
Well, let me give you a point of clarity that wasn't very clear to people.
What might that be, Jeff?
We have the Memorial Day parade,
Yes.
and I heard people complaining, why weren't there any middle school bands in the parade?
Aha.
And I said to myself, didn't you pay attention to the override last year that one of the things that was going to be eliminated was music and arts at the middle school?
At the middle school.
And that's why they weren't marching in the parade. You need to put two and two together.
But it's
I
hard to
couldn't see
do that
something as
in the
clear as that.
But it's hard to do that in the cacophony of all of the other town services I would throw out to us. In other words, well, yeah, I remember seeing that, but there was a lot of other things too that were coming right at me.
Mm-hmm.
No is easy. Most of the negatives are easy.
Yeah. And,
because-
you know, LBJ phrased it well.
Yes.
That.
Any jackass can knock down a barn, but it takes a good carpenter to build one.
Well, it takes a whole community in some
Yeah.
instances to
Need a
build
rim
that.
shot on that one.
Ba-boom.
But
So help me out here. The clarity in terms of when teachers are out advocating
Yeah.
for this, when the school committee comes back to the town, doesn't the school committee have to then put in context? Oh, okay. Here's the budget for the town. Here's our slice of that. And then suddenly the whole ball of wax gets put together, and the town does not see the clarity of, well, this is what teachers are advocating for. They see this is what the town is advocating for. And doesn't that go back to your issue of trust, Alan, in terms of, well, it's not necessarily the trust for the schools, it's the trust for our town leadership.
Yeah.
right.
Well, let
Right.
me just throw in one thought. Since I'm sitting on the same side of the table with Pete, we're both on the information side of
Yes.
ostensibly presenting townspeople with information about what goes on. Pete runs a TV station. I have an independent online site that provides news. We still are nowhere near doing enough. I always go back to the beginning of my career at the local newspaper 2 towns over that covered every single thing in that town, from
We were there together.
a Cub Scout meeting
Yeah.
to a small thing. And oh, by the way, in Washington, they decided to bomb some third world country, all in one place every single day.
Right.
Yeah.
People had a common basis for talking about things,
Right.
as opposed to many, many, many diverse sources. none of which may be any more trustworthy than that newspaper of the long ago.
Right.
But it was a consistent thing that you could judge things and think against, and everybody had a consistent source of information. And the people that ran it back in those days had hungry reporters who would go to every single meeting, and they would find the controversy. If there was an issue, they would identify it and articulate it for readers. So readers had a lot more fidelity of what was going on in the
Bingo.
community.
Yes.
And now it's slogans, too much information and too
Yeah.
little information at the same
Reductio
time,
ad absurdum.
which hurts everybody in every cause. It makes it
Yeah.
difficult
Yes.
people to think well about things.
Yes. Max, help us out. I know your time is limited
Well,
here.
Yeah, I just want to just jump on this because, what we're experiencing with these overrides and the layoffs is a huge fiscal crisis in our communities. And this is, I'm sure, and Cecily is nodding, and this is not unique to Massachusetts, but we have our share of it. And that's why we've had this very difficult moment. Look, as unions, we operate on multiple levels. The locals negotiate contracts, and they need to push for their share of what's needed, they demand what's needed for the public schools. But we are part of a bigger union, the Mass Teachers Association, that also advocates for more funds statewide. And as you well know, we won the Fair Share Amendment. And not just we, but the MTA put a lot of energy and money and energy into winning a millionaire's tax, which is producing $3 billion this year for education and transportation. And many of our locals are saying, wait, we want to make sure more of that comes down here. So the crisis is also about what's the ratio between what comes from the state and what comes from the municipality. And it's actually kind of understood that there is close to 59% that comes from municipalities to pay for their schools and 41% overall from the state. Lower income communities get much more from the state, but maybe that ratio is the wrong ratio. And we're seeing that localities are really strapped. They are torn, Jeff, as you said, between many different elements. At the same time, there's a debate. When you have $5 million in free cash, is that the exact right amount? Or maybe more of that should be going to the public schools. There's a legitimate debate that goes on. That's what bargaining's about. And that's what locals sometimes say. It's so important what we need, and we believe the money is there, that we're going to make this case. I just want to say is we should remember in Massachusetts, per capita, if we were a nation, the Republic of Massachusetts, we would be the 6th wealthiest nation on earth. And I bet California is up there too. Meaning the concentration of wealth is enormous. It's not equally divided, it's not fairly divided, but I think we are privileged to have a Commonwealth that, because of its education and many other things, has been able to produce enormous wealth. I think what you're hearing is people at the local level saying, wait a second, we have the resources. Why isn't there a middle school band here? Why did we have to cut that? That's terrible. Why can't we pay at least a minimum wage, at least a living wage for ESPs? So some of the tension is that, and a strike is one, not extreme, a powerful action that locals have taken to raise up the level of need that there is when there are so many resources overall in the Commonwealth.
Cecily, help us. I know you also have limited time. What about the idea of resources in Los Angeles? When you're at the bargaining table, are you advocating for resources that can come through the school committee? I mean, do they have taxing authority? But I know you have limits in California. It's not that you can just go out and say, okay, we've got this money coming from the state. There are limits and some boundaries upon which each community has to live. Help us out there.
Well, I mean, for us, we are dealing with a massive reserve. A massive reserve in our district. Our district has hoarded $6.3 billion in reserves. I think it's down to $5 billion. But when we went on strike in 2019, it was 1.87. When we went on strike in 2023, it was 3.4. And then just before 3 months ago, it was at $6.3 billion in reserves. This is the largest reserve. It's a rainy day fund. Well, it's raining. So use the money. And what we're saying is spend the money where it's needed, which is in our classrooms, not just for educators, but for classified, for ESPs, the lowest paid workers. We need more of those workers. We need more bus drivers. We need more special ed assistants. That is where you spend the money. And what I would say, a couple of things, and just listening in on the override, as you put it, obviously there needs to be more education because people couldn't draw two and two together with the lack of resources and the middle school band. There's got to be a little bit more education there. And that's, to me, that's the essential. Because if you show me your budget, then you're showing me your priorities. That's the way I've always seen it. And for us here, having a reserve ending balance year after year in the billions of dollars, that means you are not spending it to the folks that are closest to the pain. And if you're always having this overriding ending balance, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Nobody needs more books that are dusty on the shelf. We are done with having endless computer programs. If we really want to educate the citizenry, as you stated a little earlier, that means we need to focus in on critical thinking skills. And you don't learn that from a book. I'm a middle school English teacher, 6th and 7th grade. You learn critical thinking skills by applying it every day and having the real-time conversations. And that's what we're not doing. For us in our district, when you're spending more on consultants and vendors, and you're not spending it in the classroom with educators, then I can tell you right now, then you're not about making sure that our students get every single thing they need.
I think,
And it
you know
goes
what?
beyond money. It goes beyond money. Teachers deserve to have a living wage. ESPs deserve to have a living wage. This is what folks are telling you. Like I said, one job should be absolutely enough. But when an educator comes into the classroom and they now have to be the nurse, they now have to be the caretaker, they now have to be the mental health professional, they now have to dole out food, they now have to clean up the classroom, and you're only paying me this amount of money?
It makes it
Now,
tough.
I know we didn't get into teaching to have $1 million, but at least can I afford to buy a home in the neighborhood of where I work?
And your point is well taken, I think. And look, I know that Max has got to go. I want to thank both of you for your time, for your insight and your intellect, not only on this topic, but also giving us some understanding of where the teachers and the teachers union, the educators, the paraprofessionals, etc., who absolutely do a stellar job in our schools. And I would agree it's important to understand. And I absolutely love the concept that especially your teachers, it goes back to that old saying, like the preachers. Preachers live in the communities where they preach. And I think the teachers should at least be close to, if not live in the communities where they teach. And if I'm a paraprofessional, and it's true actually for most of the, and I think Max and Cecily help me if I missed this point, but I think it's true for paraprofessionals. A majority of them do live in the communities where they work. Thank you again for your time. We're going to close out here with our panel. But any last thought, Max?
No, thank you. Thank you very much. We've got a big, important year ahead. And, not only all the things we've been talking about today, which were really so important, we're also just facing a full-on attack from the federal government, from this administration, on the very idea of public education. So we got to be unified as much as possible to defend those public schools and our students and our members.
Here, here. I agree.
Cecily Myarts Cruz, president of the United
I
Teachers
think-
of Los Angeles.
Yes, we have a lot of work to do together. I think this was informational. Hopefully, we gained insight on either side. And we should continue the conversation because, like Max said, we are under attack. We're going to need everybody standing shoulder to shoulder with us as they're trying to decimate public education as we know it. And we've got to be strong. We've got to fight back and fight forward. And the way we do that is getting into the streets together in a unified front, not in a striking way yet. We're building to that, but stay tuned to maydaystrong.org, where we can continue to have the conversation. And let's look toward Labor Day actions that we need to have to generate some consciousness out here.
President Cruz, how many members do you have?
39,000.
39,000.
Not 150.
Oh, okay. I thought I may have made an error there, but 39,000 members in the United Teachers.
39,000 members strong. We're the second largest local in the country, and coming behind New York.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Max Page, president of the Mass Teachers Association.
Thank you for the invitation, Michael.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Before we close out, Max hit on something that we have in front of us, but actually didn't come up in the conversation at all, which is that not only do we have a crisis in terms of finance and support at the local level, but the federal government looks like it wants to move away from funding just about anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to prove to be devastating, first to the state, because I would propose that most of the monies that we're looking at are going to be felt first at the state level, because you're going to have to make up some of that vacuum. And I feel for our great and general court. Let me start with something that's actually a little side of the of education, and let's just take the national parks. The National Park Service, which provides a lot of the protection in terms of fire and fire prevention and support for maintenance and whatnot of our parks, if they move out, the park is still there. The threats are still there as the wildfires that are raging now on the Oregon-Washington border. And the state now is going to have to then provide the resources for that. I'm not sure that the country really...
The state can't do that because it's federal land.
Well, it's federal land, but if there's a fire and no one shows up, what do? You just watch it burn until it hits Massachusetts public land? I don't think anyone is going to do that. We're going to send some kind of response there, don't you think?
Certainly as a matter of practicality.
It seems
but,
so.
Yeah, I know that, for instance, when you go into upstate New York, there's a lot of federal land up there.
Yes.
That's, codified as, a region. But there's a lot of poverty up there. And
Yes.
there's not much that the state can do about it, given the status of the land. And so we're kind of digressing here a little bit. I want to
Well,
kind of get us back on track.
Well, I'll get us back on track real quick, because when you isn't that my job? Because when you look at, let's take something then as simple as services for special needs children. All right, we have cities of poverty. New Bedford, Fall River, Springfield, Holyoke, large swaths of Boston, okay, and other areas where those students are now going to be deprived of the funds that they need. And who's going to make that up? Is it because it becomes our obligation as the state of Massachusetts, doesn't it? Okay, it really was never a federal obligation,
Right.
but at the same time, now we have to contribute to that, which is going to make the teachers, the support personnel, the people who maintain and look after our schools, our educational support. It's going to make their jobs just almost impossible, because they're not going to have the funds that they have relied on for years. And it looks like if the Department of Education is decimated, then again, where do they go to seek redress?
It also begs the question that if the Department of Education goes away and budgeting goes away, are there unfunded mandates that go away at the federal level? In other words, one of the things DOE was chartered with was trying to ensure some type of equity, equivalency across the country, where states run their own education systems, but at least the federal government could promote certain minimums, promote certain base levels of education with funding without influencing local policy or regional policy directly. But, if they opt out, then does the work of the schools become more local, simpler in some form?
Again, in closing this out, and I'd really love your final thoughts on this. I think this is an issue that's larger than just, and I think President Page from MTA put it quite nicely when he said that this may be one of the human rights issues of now, primarily because how do you, in the threat and face of a federal government that looks like it wants to exert control not just over the venue of government workers, but over almost all aspects of our lives, how do we as a state ensure that we have codified at least protections for both authority as well as those that have to deal with authority? How do we do that?
So you're phrasing that as a closing remark for this?
I am.
You've opened
just
up
opened up
a
another
huge,
Yeah,
huge
I
discussion.
am.
Look
I
at, this is a series of conversations that are going to
Right.
be taking place over the foreseeable future. We are in uncharted waters. We are seeing things happening that many of us have never seen in our lives. And, I wish I had the answers to these issues and problems, but I
But
don't.
isn't this one of the challenges, though?
It's a challenge,
You know,
right? It's a challenge why I'm still in government today, and where I say I need to continue in this role because I have a moral and legal obligation to do my job and do it well,
Right.
and help us navigate through some really tough.
Some of the subtle
waters.
things that we're doing right now may have implications for a generation.
Yeah.
And this may be one of those issues, which is why I'm really surprised that our governor, who has taken a position, for example, on this issue of strikes, where she's against it, rather than contemplate the, maybe the traditional kind of approach here is not necessarily what we need, because we're not only looking at now, we're looking at what is this going to do to that labor environment that we have so cherished over the years. It's not going to be the same continuation.
I will tell you, I was uncomfortable with the thought of coming in and having this particular discussion today.
Until now.
No. I said, boy, do I want to get involved
Right.
in a topic as volatile as that?
Understood.
But also understood, hey, that's my job. I have to take on the tough issues. I have to participate in the difficult conversations. And, I learned a lot today, and I'm glad I did.
Let me just throw in a few things, again, from a conservative perspective. Listening to all this, all the things I kept coming back to were competition with other municipalities, which you mentioned. There's competition factors in everything we do, outcome factors, what are children actually getting from the school system, and are we doing it the right way? If you go back to the time of our 1978 strike, I know two people, both Democrats, both professionals at that time, refused to go out on strike because they felt it was not professional to do so. And that was a more common attitude back then. People in professions were less inclined to be unionized. My dad was actually part of a union very reluctantly as a college instructor. He wasn't happy about it, but he really felt like there wasn't a lot of choice. And he had to listen to Howard Zinn, which was difficult for him. Howard Zinn came and organized them.
Right.
But I think the catalyst that the federal government's actions currently take, which may or may not be right, I don't know. As you know, I lean that way, but I can see it could be bad, but it could also be good because it forces really clear thinking. What are the real priorities? What are we actually getting out of this dollar that we're spending? Is it what we want? And I think it gives us it makes us ask those questions. And I'm not anti-union, but I think the question should not be how many class hours and how much time with a given teacher, because not all teachers are beloved. I know I went to school, a bunch of teachers taught me great things, a bunch of other teachers wasted my time and tortured me. And that's just a fact. I think most people
Were you
probably
conservative back then?
leaning that way. But I think it's fair to we should ask those questions because
Yes.
if you have limited money and limited choices, everything should be on the table, and you should ask how do we get there.
Right.
Can unions be part of a discussion about ensuring that the teachers that are teaching are the best possible and most effective possible? And I'm not sure that always happens when you have 39,000 members, as our friend in Los Angeles has. Are all 39,000 of those people contributing in the same way?
They're bigger than our whole town.
Exactly. That way big.
Right.
So I just think we should be considering those issues as well as the specifics of
But
when
Alan,
or
I would
should people strike.
challenge us here at this table, though, that those conversations have always taken place.
But they
that
take place more when you're forced to choose between A and B, when there's less money.
Granted that there are sort of nexus points when the conversation gets heightened, but I would say that they've always been there. And I think that, again, we're getting into a deeper play here, but I think you're absolutely correct that now is one of those times when we're forced into that conversation, okay? And it's not just about the dollar. I think our government is pushing us into a series of questions about our entire rule and our rule of law.
That's definitely
And
another
that to me has implications that go to the question that's on hand. Let's not forget that the issue of how do we preserve our democracy is embedded in those things that we put into our laws that help protect people who are trying to fight for our democracy.
I want to also just bring up something here, and I want to come in and second what you were talking about. There was a comment you made about some teachers wasting your time. I totally agree.
And then
That is-
people just maybe not great teachers.
That's right, exactly. And so, there's the old Woody Allen joke: "Those who can't do teach; those who can't teach Jim."
Ouch.
Ouch.
Edit
But,
that.
Yeah. No, but I bring up a key point. Remember that unions sprang up in Europe, hundreds of years ago from what were actually guilds,
Yes.
and the job of the guild was not only to bring together people of like skill sets and whatnot, represent, et cetera, but it was to develop
Yes.
those skill sets and to raise up the entire populace that was involved in that. For instance, here in America, which I'm very familiar with, the Directors Guild of America, DGA. When we make movies, one of the things the Directors Guild does is make us all better directors, film directors. IBEW, the electricians union, right? They have a series of tests in order, you
Right.
apprentice, you intern, you
Right.
move up, you become a master electrician, and you become really good at your job because a lot of safety is involved. And the union is a powerful proponent of that safety and that skill set. So when we hire an electrician in the freelance market, hello, the electrician that we hire, we have a reasonable
Right.
belief that he's going to be pretty good.
If they have certification from
All
the
of that,
union,
there you go, right.
Well, they've passed certain levels of assessment and
and so
criteria.
just
Right.
in hindsight, I kind of wish we got into the whole thing where the union is with respect to the notion of raising up the skill set of teachers, because I know a lot of teachers obviously are self-motivated to do that. That's part of what their summer is about sometimes. But that said, I know that there's this also issue of tenure and seniority, which can push against that, where some teachers in very high senior positions, feel like they're locked in, and now they can just coast. So I wish that there was, if we're really talking about quality of life, the middle school band wasn't there. That's an abstraction of a quality of life that the budget impacted. And so how it is that we manage to get unions to be seen more and more like the old guilds. Because if you take on that mindset as a union, we are a guild, I think you get more out of the union than just sitting down and bargaining every 3 years.
And
fighting the fight.
you've brought up a very interesting future show for us.
Yeah.
Because I think, again, we're very fortunate here in Massachusetts, and just personal knowledge that I have, that both of the two teacher unions in this state have contributed to things like the new teacher induction program in Massachusetts, the certification requirements. Both of our unions have contributed, along with the administration, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and have worked together, which has helped to establish Massachusetts. I know Max Page had said that if you look at us in terms of our economy, we'd be the 5th in the world. Well, if you look at us in terms of our education,
Number one.
we're number one,
We'll take it.
which is...
Can we leave it on that note?
we certainly can
right.
for this particular episode.
Because I want to just
Okay.
end on a really high
Really
note.
high note.
Yeah.
So I'll
Oh,
sum it up and say,
okay.
well, we're only number one, so how do we get better?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, listen, I want to thank our panel, Alan, Peter, and Jeff. I'm Michael Walker Jones, and if you would please help us with our wonderful technical staff, and let's go out with a bang.
Today we have been piloted by Chris Flynn and Taylor Tremblay, who have made all of this possible, and they, behind the scenes, make us look far better than we deserve, right?
And they make faces at us.
Well, there's that too.
Right.
And so thank you all, as Dr. Michael Walker Jones said, for being here. I'm Peter J. Look forward to seeing you again on the very next edition of More Perfect Union. Have a great day. This program was made possible by your Franklin friends and neighbors, good folks just like you. Thanks for supporting Franklin TV. And thanks for watching.